It's Subverted Tropes, a podcast about movies, featuring your hosts Daniel Spencer and Kate Harlow.
Welcome to another episode of Subverted Tropes. I'm Dan.
I'm Kate.
Hey, Kate.
Hey, Dan.
How you doing?
I'm good. How's your birthday month going?
You know it's going great.
Good.
I'm so excited to get to watch so many of my favorite movies with my favorite person.
So this week, I did the research on this one. Listeners, I hope you enjoy. This is a little bit of a game of how much could I actually find that Dan doesn't already know about one of his favorites. But this week, we are discussing the 1979 sci-fi horror Alien.
A classic.
Absolutely.
Listeners, devotees may know our associate producer,
Ripley.
Ripley. Say hi.
She jumped up into Dan's lap just immediately as he started saying that. It was perfect.
Ripley is, of course, named after Lieutenant Ellen Ripley from the Alien franchise.
Because she is a kick-ass lady.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing. Like, the character of Lieutenant Ellen Ripley is one of my favorite characters because she's she's very strong. She's incredibly smart. She doesn't hesitate. Mm-hmm. She's like, oh, well, people need saving. We're going to go save them. Takes care of Newt. She's just fantastic. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the movie.
Okay. So it's 1974, and writer Dan O'Bannon's first feature film, Dark Star, directed by John Carpenter, is made and released with a very small operating budget. Due to this budget, the creature, Alien, was made out of a beach ball that had been spray painted black. So O'Bannon was dissatisfied with this, and he wanted to create something with a more realistic creature. He also wanted to write something with a more intense feel rather than the goofy humor feel of Dark Star.
Dark Star is just it's campy fun is what it is. And it is very clearly a beach ball. So
apologies to any people who found out that O'Bannon had written something previous to Alien and were like, oh, cool, let's go get that. And then we're like, what am I watching? So, in writing what would become Alien, O'Bannon was later quoted as saying, I didn't steal Alien from anybody. I stole it from everybody. Most specifically, viewers and critics identified 1951's The Thing from Another World, 1956's Forbidden Planet, 1965's Planet of the Vampires, along with a couple of short stories and comic plots. O'Bannon co-authored the script with Ronald Shusett, picking up a previously abandoned concept that he had started titled Memory. It's another one of those vague titles that I love that could be about anything.
Destiny and memory.
Shusett then suggested that O'Bannon incorporate another idea he had but hadn't fully developed, involving a B-17 bomber in World War II being infiltrated by a set of gremlins. The working title by this point was Star Beast, but was eventually changed to Alien.
The Star Beast sailing through the sky.
It was changed to Alien after Shusett and O'Bannon noted how often the word is used throughout the script. So the cast is a very small cast, which is one of the things that winds up making it as interesting and compelling as it is ultimately. But it has Tom Skerritt as Dallas, the captain of the Nostromo, which is the ship. Sigourney Weaver as Ripley, the warrant officer. Veronica Cartwright as Lambert, the navigator.
Or maybe Lambert, the sheepish lion, which is a joke that maybe only my mom is going to get. I say joke, reference, that really only my mom and maybe Jenny of our listeners. I don't think Mom even listens.
Harry Dean Stanton as Brett, the engineering technician. John Hurt as Kane, the executive officer, the late and great Sir John Hurt. Ian Holm as Ash.
The late and great Kane with his incredible scene.
Spoilers. Ian Holm as Ash, the ship's scientific officer. And Yapet Kotto as Parker, the chief engineer. Once the film was picked up by a small and newly formed production company named Brandywine, which was a company with ties to 20th Century Fox, creators of Brandywine, David Giler and Walter Hill, came on as producers, but they wanted to overhaul the script, and that became a huge point of contention because Shusett commented that Geiler and Hill had no experience with science fiction. They weren't actually making it any better. They were actually maybe making it worse. One thing that did stick, however, were the name changes that they made. The original names didn't stick. However, O'Bannon and Shusett had a clause with the original script indicating that the characters were all to be unisex. None of them had a specific gender assigned to them, and thus could be cast either way. Though they did later admit that they had not at all envisioned Ripley as a woman.
That I did not know. Mm-hmm. That is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. So the film marks the first leading role for Sigourney Weaver, who had had some Broadway experience, but was little known in film. They brought on Ridley Scott as director, and he commented in later years that it was between Sigourney and another actress. Do you know who?
I don't.
Meryl Streep. The two had been classmates at Yale, but Meryl was sadly mourning the death of her partner, John Cazale, at the time that the casting was going on.
That is very unfortunate for her.
Very sad for her, but
I don't know how she would have done in this.
I think she would have done excellently, but I think the trajectory...
She's Meryl
She's
Streep.
Meryl Streep. The trajectory of her career, I think, would have taken a very, very different slant.
Yes, I think
if that had been a major point. Veronica Cartwright also read for the part of Ripley and didn't know that she hadn't been cast as the lead until she was called in for a costume fitting as Lambert.
Oh my goodness. So, we're so glad that you're here. Welcome on set. We've given you your own trailer. You're not in the lead. And, craft services right over there.
I'm sorry?
Craft services is right over there.
Oh. Do they have bagels?
They've got donuts that the glaze has been rinsed off of.
Cake style or...
Yeah, they're cake donuts. Look, you're not the lead. I'm sorry. We cast Sigourney Weaver instead.
Who?
Sigourney Weaver.
Never heard of her.
Yeah, no, we're taking a risk.
Sir John Hurt was the first choice to play Kane, but he was actually signed on to another project at the time, so John Finch was cast, but later had to pull out due to illness. Hurt was then actually able to come back to the production because of complications with the one that he was signed on to. That other production had been set to film in South Africa, and the country mistook John Hurt for actor John Hurd, who was outspokenly opposed to apartheid and was blacklisted from entering the country. Which Hurt later clarified he was also opposed to the apartheid, but hadn't been personally blacklisted from the country, but the confusion still stood in his way, but ultimately led to him being an alien, so.
Yeah. That is amazing. That's just, I'm sorry. Could you say your name again, please?
John Hurt.
Okay, all right. Yes, I'm sorry. You're not allowed in. You're right here on the list. See, John Hurd.
Excuse me?
I said, see, it's right here on the list. It's John Hurd.
Ya heard?
Yep, that's exactly how that interaction went, I'm sure.
The alien was portrayed by 26-year-old design student Balaji Badeo. He was discovered in a bar, and somebody on the production put him in touch with Ridley Scott because he was a towering 6'10" tall, fully 7 feet in the alien costume. He was then sent to be trained in Tai Chi to be able to slow down his movements and move in that eerie, slow, controlled manner that they had envisioned for the character. Two stuntmen also had the role in a couple of shots, Eddie Powell and Roy Scamell. Eddie Powell and Roy Scamell. The film marked a departure from typical horror cast, and this is a huge long quote from Roger Ebert. None of them were particularly young. Tom Skerritt, the captain, was 46. Hurt was 39, but looked older. He really did. That's my personal note. He always did look much older. Holm was 48. Harry Dean Stanton was 53. Yaphet Kotto was 42. And only Veronica Cartwright at 30 and Weaver at 29 were in the age range of the usual thriller cast. Many recent action pictures have improbably young actors cast as key roles or sidekicks, but by skewing older, Alien achieves a certain texture without even making a point of it. These are not adventurers, but workers, hired by a company to return 20 million tons of ore to Earth. All of that, in summation, making the cast more easily taken seriously. Alien was filmed over 14 weeks from July 5th to October 21st in 1978. Principal photography took place at Shepperton Studios, which is near London, and they did a good deal of model and miniature work, and that was all done at Bray Studios in Water Oakley, Berkshire. So the spacesuits were not good to film in.
No?
No, not at all. They had no cooling system, and they were huge and bulky, and they were lined with nylon, and there was no vent. So a bunch of the actors nearly passed out. Nurses were kept on hand with oxygen tanks, and they only finally changed them when Ridley Scott was directing some shots against the ship set, and he felt like the regular actors looked too big and it made the ship look too small, so he put his children in a couple of the spacesuits, and they almost passed out. So then they put in a venting system.
Of course.
But yeah, Scott was really concerned that the perspective wouldn't look good because he was afraid that the ship, the Nostromo, the ship didn't look large enough convincingly. Jones, the cat, Jonesy, these 4 identical
Jonesy.
cats.
Kitty.
You look so happy.
Kitty.
Kitty, kitty. Those 4 kitties.
4 kitties.
4 Jonesies. Sigourney Weaver was originally allergic to the combination of the cat's fur and the glycerin that they were using on all of the actors to make them all look sweaty. And she commented that at first she thought, being allergic to the cat, it would be easier to just recast her instead of trying to find 4 more identical cats. But luckily they took the glycerin off her and she stopped reacting to the cat. And then, so when the cat sees the alien and like rears up and is really, really scared, they brought in a German Shepherd to the set, and like they set up a screen and they had Jonesy walking towards it, and then they moved the screen and there was this big dog there.
Poor cat.
Poor Jonesy.
Poor Jonesy.
So for each of the characters, Scott wrote detailed backstories for everybody so that they would have like something really to go off of, and then they had a bunch of rehearsals beforehand to try and encourage and breed improvisation, which wound up being challenging for the less experienced Weaver, which then convincingly led to tension between the characters in the film. The actual set itself, to create a sense of claustrophobia and realism, these sets were created entirely in one piece. So each deck of the ship was occupying a separate soundstage, but they were all connected. So to get from one part, you had to walk all the way through to get to the next part. And it was specifically created using like low-res computers and like big transistors and stuff to make it look used and industrial with retrofitted old technology.
That's awesome.
The design of the alien itself came from Swiss artist H.R. Geiger.
H.R. Geiger. He did some Hellboy stuff once.
Ooh.
That's just phenomenal.
I believe it. O'Bannon was fascinated with Geiger's work, finding it both disturbing, but also really fascinating. That was redundant. He was quoted as saying, his paintings had a profound effect on me. I had never seen anything that was quite as horrible and at the same time as beautiful as his work. And so I ended up writing a script about a Geiger monster. Geiger was brought onto the actual film production to handle the design of the alien. He took care of every aspect dealing directly with the alien, all of the various stages, as well as the set for the alien craft that they find. Geiger actually airbrushed that entire set and the skeleton of the alien that they find, which they nicknamed the Space Jockey.
Mm-hmm.
He airbrushed all of that by hand.
Jeez.
Quick
amendment. I had to look it up. I got things backwards. H.R. Geiger didn't do anything Hellboy. Mike Mignola, creator of Hellboy, wrote an alien comic. So, sorry.
That's okay. So, due to the budget, the set for the alien craft was really small. It was all one wall, and they moved the cameras around to make it look like there was more. That same set was also used for the egg chamber. They just removed the Space Jockey and put in a ton of eggs. But the lighting effects in that scene with the eggs were actually borrowed from rock band The Who were rehearsing in the studio next door and testing lighting effects for their stage show. And the alien ship wound up being named the Big Croissant because of its giant horseshoe shape.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. Just Mr. Townsend, big fan. Really love your stuff. Really want to use your stuff, and I mean, like your lights. Can we just we just need because we need to make some effects, and we want. I know you're busy. But we need can we just use your light effects in our movie?
All right.
Great. Thanks. Big fan.
So the face hugger effect that was made by shooting it was made of a sheep's intestine, and then they shot it out of an egg using high pressure air hoses. That design went through several versions before Geiger decided on the creature as it was, with like humanish fingers and a long tail. When it was brought to set, it was supposed to be painted black, but Scott loved the creepy feeling of like the human flesh color and insisted it not be painted. The dead face hugger that we later see being autopsied was made of a mix of oysters, sheep kidney, and raw shellfish.
Ooh, now I'm really hungry.
No, you're not.
No, I'm not. That sounds disgusting.
I'm sure it smelled great too. So I think everybody in the world knows at this point that the cast was taken by surprise with the famous chest bursting scene.
Mm-hmm.
They knew that a creature would be coming out of Hurt, but they didn't know how much blood was going to be used. So the shocked reaction from everybody are completely genuine. It was filmed from 4 angles all at once. It's all one take. And Veronica Cartwright was hit by some of the flying blood and was so shocked and surprised by it, but she legitimately went into shock herself. Hurt was positioned with his head and arms coming from underneath the table, and while they took time to set up the artificial torso with all the blood and puppet and all that, it took so long that Hurt was requested and was brought some of his favorite wine to enjoy while he was stuck there.
Hey, this is going to be a tough scene for all of us. Can I get a little shitty? I'm going to get a little shitty for this scene. All right? Okay, that sounds good. Thanks.
Empire Magazine actually named that scene as the greatest 18-rated moment in film history in a 2007 issue. Okay. The alien itself is never shot head-on, partially to conceal that a human skull was actually used. I don't think it was actually a skull, but like a human skull shape was used in the construction. So if you had seen it set head on, you would see the humanoid face. The head and jaw had over 900 moving parts, and that was in part to create the rigid tongue with its own little teethy mouth. The original jaw is currently on display at the Smithsonian, and the original bodysuit was sold at auction in 2007. The noises from the creature were performed by Percy Edward, who is a famous voice artist known for providing bird sounds for British television during the 1960s and 70s, as well as the whale sounds for Orca, Killer Whale, the 1977 movie. O'Bannon had originally assumed he was going to be directing, but 20th Century Fox instead asked Hill to direct. Hill declined, and while a bunch of other directors were suggested, the production team had concerns that the names suggested would not take it seriously and instead would treat it like a B-monster movie. Giler, Hill, and Carroll had all been really impressed with Ridley Scott's debut feature film, The Duelists, in 1977, so that was how Scott got brought on. And then just straight up, the budget was a mess. At first, it was $4.5 million, and then it was supposedly doubled when Ridley Scott signed on, but then it was increased again after a request from Scott because the original ending hadn't been tacked on, and he had a vision to have that last bit with the Narcissus, and went to Fox and was like, hey, I really want to resolve this, so can I have some money, please?
Money, please.
Actually, the original script, the ship was named the Narcissus, and then it was changed to the Nostromo. So the escape pod being named the Narcissus was a callback.
I love it.
Editing and post-production took 20 weeks. The first cut was over 3 hours long. They managed to get it down to just under 2 hours. The musical score was performed by the National Philharmonic Orchestra, as conducted by Lionel Newman, and was composed by Jerry Goldsmith.
Can you imagine, though, like if Stephen Schwartz got to it and made it a musical? I mean, the chest bursting scene there wouldn't be any lyrics.
It'd be a hell of a dance number, though.
But it would be an amazing dance number. And then, of course, in Aliens 2, there'd be an entire, just like the epic show-stopping number of "Get Away from Her, You Bitch." I know I said Aliens 2, and it's just Aliens, but I was just talking quickly, and my brain didn't process it. So please don't at me.
Don't at us. Yeah, and I guess that's I'm gonna leave it at that for the first half. You want to go watch this movie?
Of course I do.
Okay.
And we're back.
We're back.
God, that's such a good movie.
It really is fantastic. It's been a long time since I've seen it.
It's just top to bottom, just so good.
Mm-hmm. The marketing for the movie was completely insane. There were 2 separate books based on the script.
Mm-hmm.
There was a graphic novel. There was a calendar made and released in 1980. Musical tracks based on the main themes were released, and there was even a disco single released in the UK. There was a model making kit to create a 12-inch tall alien statue, as well as board games. And then in the years following, there have been tons of video games and spin-offs. There was also an official Halloween costume line released in 1979.
Beautiful.
So it premiered in American theaters on May 25th, 1979, which is exactly 2 years to the day after the release of Star Wars.
Nice.
The film had no formal premiere, but people lined up around the block at Grauman's Egyptian Theater in Hollywood. The theater had a bunch of models and sets and props on display outside during its first run. Shout out to our friends Ben and Mike over at the podcast Back to the Futurama, because I actually have anecdotes from the Futurama commentary soundtracks.
Nice.
The season 4 episode, it's in the season 4 disc compilation. It's the 3rd episode, but it's actually a show for ACV03, Love and Rocket, that Sigourney Weaver guest voiced on. The commentary track, they're talking about the movie Alien. And Matt Groening really recalls when he went to see it, when it premiered, there was a theater employee, there was a giant statue of the space jockey. And he kept saying, like, don't touch it, like, don't put your hands on it. And Matt found that very amusing when he went into the movie. He came out and somebody had lit it on fire. And that actually came up in my research as well.
He was there for that?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Some religious zealots lit fire to the model of the space jockey because they believed it was the work of the devil.
Of course.
And then Futurama writer and executive producer David X. Cohen relates that when he was seeing it, it wasn't the first time that he was seeing it, but at the very end, when Ripley is in the escape pod stripping down, as we noted very gratuitously, into her underwear, somebody in the audience yelled out, "Same underwear," because she doesn't change her underwear at all that we see throughout the movie. So the critical reception was mixed, though some of the greatest critics actually contradicted themselves over time. Roger Ebert, when it was released, said it was basically just an intergalactic haunted house thriller set inside a spaceship. But later, when he wrote his great movies list, Alien was listed with 4 stars, being noted as a great original. It is 97% certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. And somebody actually made note, a writer named David McEntee actually realized that there were some similarities with a Doctor Who episode, but at the time episodes were in 4 pieces, so it's technically 4 episodes to make one story. But The Ark in Space, which featured the 4th Doctor, Tom Baker, and that was released in 1975.
Interesting.
Alien won the 1979 Academy Award for visual effects, and it was nominated for a ton of other awards, Grammy, Saturn Awards, BAFTAs, I think. The Oscar win was huge because up until that point, and also very much since then, the Academy really doesn't acknowledge sci-fi, like, at all.
Yeah, sci-fi and horror really get a lot of short ends of the stick.
Yeah. And this is maybe the thing that I think is the coolest. So you are familiar with the Bechdel test.
Oh, yes.
The origin of the Bechdel test was an art column by Alison Bechdel called Dykes to Watch Out For. And in that, it once proposed a simple test, the Bechdel test, as it came to be known, to see if female characters were treated as equal members of the cast. It has 3 rules. The film must feature at least 2 female characters who have a conversation with each other that isn't about one of the male characters. And in that column, the character who says it specifically cites Alien as the last movie they recollect that passes the test.
I like it.
So that's where that really came from.
Nice.
And that's all I got.
Nice. Well, that was great research. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the tropes.
Yes.
One huge trope that sticks out that is definitely not the first time that this came up, but is often cited as an example of it is the final girl trope.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That, everybody else is dead and she's the last one.
Mm-hmm.
What I like about it is that she doesn't fit the standard final girl trope of like innocent, like
Weak,
virginal,
screamy.
yeah, like that sort of thing.
Well, and one of the things about that kind of ties in with that last fact that I gave and ties back to the fact that all of the characters were written as unisex. So, like, any one of those characters could have been cast as a male character. And I think the writers treated everybody more equitably writing that way.
Yeah.
And I think that could be a service to a huge number of writers today.
I agree completely.
Treat people like people.
We have the trope of you think the monster's dead, but it isn't.
Mm-hmm. The changing of the monster, you think you're expecting one thing and something else comes at you.
Yeah. There's tons of Luton buses in this movie where it's like tension, 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 Jonesy.
Actually, do you want to explain what a Luton bus is? Because I don't think we've discussed it on the podcast.
Oh, yeah, okay. A Luton bus is when they build up tension in a movie and everyone knows there's about to be a jump scare, and then it's not the killer or the monster or whatever. Frequently, it's a cat, which is a reference to the first movie where that was really done, Cat People, as produced by Val Lewton, where the main character's walking, well, one of the main characters, but she's walking home and tension's building up. She thinks there's a giant cat pursuing her. And then there's screeching that sounds like a cat, but it's the brakes of a bus. And tension's gone. She gets on the bus and is fine. But so a lot of the times when there's that coined the phrase a Luton bus. And so now when there's a Luton bus, a lot of times it's a cat to make reference back to Cat People.
Yep.
And there's a lot of those in this movie.
There are. And they're Jonesy.
And they're Jonesy.
They're Jonesy.
You kitty.
Cutie. Let's see. There is the spoiler, but somebody's a robot.
Yeah. Yeah, someone is not who they seem,
Mm-hmm.
and that person is bad.
And they're working for a shady government that has put everything forth for nefarious purposes.
Mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like they just, it's just referred to as mother, for like as the main like computer system thing that they have. They're working for
The corporation.
the corporation Wayland.
Which was supposed to be a very thinly veiled reference to the CIA, because at that time in writing, it was like super okay and super common to make light of the CIA as being a like dark, nefarious thing.
Nice. Let's see what else.
There's been the audience surrogate in Lambert.
Yeah.
And that actually came directly from the writers. It was part of Veronica Cartwright complained she didn't like how complainy the character was. Haha. But she was reassured that, you know, she was the placeholder for the audience. They could put themselves in her shoes, because if they were there, they would be terrified and they would be arguing to get out of there and not hang around for the whole time. Something's in the air vents.
Yep. Going through the air vents. That's what I like about this movie, is that it has a bunch of tropes, but they're
it
harder
doesn't-
to identify because
Yeah,
they
it doesn't feel heavy or overhanded.
Yeah, they've taken the standard trope and either subverted it in some way, or they've reframed it so that it doesn't feel like that same trope. And I think it's so good.
Oh, I do remember the chestburster. Though it may not be the first one in cinematic history, it is the most common one pointed to and kind of became its own trope because it was the most memorable of any of that.
Yeah, it's very, very memorable. Oh boy. It's been a very long time since I've seen Aliens. I would love to do an entire month on this whole franchise.
I'm
But
down.
just ignore Prometheus and the one that just came out.
Yeah, so some of the concepts that they had written for the original that they dropped wound up being picked back up and explained in Prometheus and whatever that next one was. Some of the, like, and honestly, I feel like it would have been uncalled for in this one, but like extra like sexual content that's just not necessary.
Yeah. And there's a whole big thing about the implied, like a lot of implied sexual content that is kind of deriving some of the scares, like some of the general like fear from this movie that we kind of chose not to get into.
Yeah, it's So I explained to Dan when we stopped to sit down and watch the movie that I had chosen to leave that stuff out because part of what I love about this is the equity in the characters and that the female characters are on equal standing with the male characters. And I felt like if we stopped and tried to explain the overtones and connotations, I felt like it would be taking away from the like cool factor of the, equal standing and, badass ladies.
Yeah, I think that's.
So,
I
if
think
you
that's
want to
fair.
research it, it's not hard to find. Especially H.R. Geiger's work. A lot of
Yeah.
it's pretty suggestive.
A lot of it's
So, Google it if you want, but I think we've provided a reasonable episode without digging into it.
Yeah, agreed. But yeah, this movie, I've seen it, several times, and it never gets old.
It's beautifully done.
It's just
There's just every reason why it's a classic.
yeah. This one is probably, it's definitely in my top 5.
Mm-hmm.
It's in my top 3. Maybe number 2 favorite movie.
Nice.
Tough to say. But I think it's going to be it.
Yeah, I think that's going to be about it. We were out sick last month, but I did a guest spot on the Amateur Animal Psychic show. So I would encourage you to look that one up. And as I mentioned before, our friends over at Back to the Futurama, there are a million ton of creative podcasts out there, and we're friends with a lot of them. And if you look us up at our Twitter, we pretty much always do a Follow Friday with some of our favorites.
That's right. And if we didn't do one, then we've retweeted one that was mentioned. Because there's just so many great podcasts out there. That Twitter is at Subverted Tropes. So give us a follow over there. You can also find us on Facebook. We've got a Facebook fan page, which is Subverted Tropes Podcast.
We have an Instagram that is Subverted Tropes.
And as always, you can send us an email at subvertedtropecast@gmail.com. Check out our blog at subvertedtropecast.wordpress.com.
And as always, a big thank you to our designer who did our beautiful logo, Gracie Boland.
She's just fantastic and very talented.
Please tell your friends, subscribe, give us a comment, give us a rating. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, Spotify, YouTube.
Wherever you get your podcasts.
Wherever you get those tunes up in your earbuds.
That's right. Those podcast tunes.
Podtune casts.
Yep, that's what they call them in the biz.
That's what the cool kids call them.
Right.
I heard them saying it.
All right. So this has been a lot of fun. Thank you guys very much, and we'll catch you next time.